Hi, and welcome to Yeshiva Shem V'Aver. I'm Rabbi David Katz. This Hanukkah edition, Parashas Miketz. The article is entitled "Echoes of Prophecy." The reason for the title, I kind of like this week's title. Wasn't just I don't know. Some weeks I really connect to the title, and some weeks it's not an emotional appeal. But the reason why I like it is because it really is echoes of prophecy. Where I thought last week would be, one and done. And as I got to learning the Parsha, I quickly saw, once I found this nugget that we'll give over, that these two Parshas are tied together. And quite possibly this will happen next week too. Right? I'm sure everybody that every year we follow along the Joseph-Judah spectrum from the time Joseph gets abandoned, rises to prominence, and then in the encounter with Judah next week, all the way through to the end of Bereshis. I mean, it really becomes a cohesive story. I think everybody feels that. It doesn't take much to realize that. Everything just becomes meshed one week after the next. Thus, the echoes of prophecy is the storyline never changes. It really just keeps going. It just gets deeper and deeper. So it's like if you miss the beginning, at least the way I felt over the years is you kind of get lost by this week, next week. You're just kind of wrapped up, and it seems redundant, doesn't it? I mean, just more Judah, more Joseph, more Judah arguing, but if you really understand what's going on, what is the issue? And it seems this year we figured it out pretty well, thanks to Joe bringing in the Torah to qualify that. It is this prophecy versus wisdom kind of drumbeat. And I think this week it's much deeper than it was last week. And I anticipate going over the Parsha this week and into next week's article, it very well may be another layer. I'm not sure, but for whatever it's worth, this week certainly is worthy of being called echoes of prophecy, because I'll just let it out now, just so no one gets lost ever. What started as I called it in the article, a snowflake eating the limb of a live animal that the Midrash uses to paint the picture of a very, very benign passing by realization that the argument between the brothers and Joseph was over that. The most abstract of the Noahide laws, probably most see it as the most irrelevant. I don't. I think it's actually probably the most relevant, but that's a different story. You see, it's an amazing commandment if you get into it, such as all the strange commandments, paraduma, red heifer, and all those kind of things. But it didn't really make that much sense last week. Why do you have to say that? But once you unpack it, and this week, we see where it goes, it's tremendous. It's not that you have to say it. No, you don't have to say that. And that's really, a major lesson to learn. A chiddush, or a novelty in Torah, a unique viewpoint, which is a chiddush, something new, a new realization. People think chiddush means, it comes from the language chadash, to make new. People think that a chiddush is something you have to say. Right? It's like no possible other answer. This is absolute truth. And that might be true in some arenas, but I like a much softer approach. It's not about what you have to say. It's about what you can and should say. It's a much more feminine and being or understanding approach than raw masculine wisdom. And again, you could even then lend itself from that level to it's a much more prophetic response. That you might not be the prophet, so to speak, by your own volition. But perhaps God, through your willingness to offer an answer, God is being prophetic through you. It's not always what you have to say to the world. It's that if you're willing to vocalize God, perhaps there are others that need to hear that vocalization. The prophecy goes through you, yet is not contingent upon you. And that's how I see the eating the limb of a live animal in this week and last week. It really provides a wonderful blueprint to these parshas. So we will get to that, and that will be the crux of the entire article once we get to that point. Okay, Haftorah time. Very simple, once again, direct to the point. Joseph rises to prominence from dreams, and he becomes I guess it's kind of in face of what we're trying to say, but he's a wise man within prophecy, okay, through dreams. In Solomon and Haftorah, through dreams, he receives wisdom, and as we know that in King Solomon's best, his wisdom is prophetic, i.e., Song of Songs. Slide over to the Zohar, a very quiet week again in the Zohar. The main point, really only one, that they brought out is the idea of remembering versus forgetting. Right? And this is the unification, really, of the tree of life. It's the forgetfulness which inspires wisdom. Why do I want to be the smartest man in the world, says the wise man? So that I'll never forget all my wisdom. Remembering is the idea of faith in God. Right? It's all there. I know for a fact I learned it or I experienced it. I went in. And by God's grace, I can have it returned to me by God through prophetic experience. Big difference here. Right? One is left, i.e. the Sitra Achra, rooted in evil approach. Even though it's not fundamentally evil, it is awfully close to that world, whereas the right side is generally seen as more righteous. So the more I fear forgetfulness, that evil side is my ego saying, because I don't want to forget, I have to be the smartest man that ever lived. And I need more wisdom, which sounds, okay, how bad is it to gain wisdom? The problem is, and this is going to be 1A and 1B of the article, this is 1B, what happens when wisdom and your ego take over and it's me versus you? That's when wisdom becomes something wrong. That's where the wisdom versus prophecy must always revert to the prophetic. Right? The right side, that it comes from God, versus the left side, whereas, me, I have to, me. Whereas the wisdom comes from you, from your forgetting, and the prophecy comes from the remembering from God. And to illustrate this point, and this is also, again, going to be a theme through the article, let's not forget this point. There's the Midrash about Shem, eating of the tree of life. Everyone that's followed the Shem series knows this Midrash by now. And it's a fantastic Midrash. That Shem, through the agency of names of God, made it to the Garden of Eden. Some say he was brought there to learn healing for Noah. He certainly merited to be there, and he essentially lives forever, whether it be in this world or in the world of Atzilus up above. Shem's soul is quite amazing. Now, what the Midrash says on that Midrash, and this is kind of like in a metaphysical place and time, is that the agency that Shem used the names to go up, it's a bit of a cunning agency, i.e. it was wisdom. Shem conceived, hey, I'm pretty smart, I know God's names, I'm a holy guy, look, I'm making it sound base, but the fact is it was from wisdom. Wisdom dictates, Shem is going to say, I am, the Shem ben Noach program. Imagine you're on the boat, you're Shem, you talk to God as a prophet, you're gonna have tremendous wisdom, tremendous insight, and you're gonna know how to navigate the spiritual world. It's called being responsible, taking command, to the point where Hashem granted the covenant of the flood in Shem's name, and not Noah's name, because Noah didn't pray to save the generation. He wanted the Amalekites, the evil members, to die, and by doing so, he allowed the Gerim to go and perish as well. Shem recognized the fault in his father and took responsibility for the flood. Shem is no slouch. One of the 4 craftsmen. We don't need to reiterate all the time about Shem, but the Midrash then comes and says, but Shem is a man. He is not God. And there's an existential gap, obviously, between man and God. So where does Shem fit the man bill? The story of time is wisdom versus prophecy. And it is not going to be corrected until Mashiach comes. Some were better at it than others, but eventually the snake wins. In fact, if you look in this week's Parsha, Joseph as the master of Mazal, of the divine providence of God's hand, and Joseph working with it, Joseph gets a little too close. He says, don't you know I'm a man who divines? Now, divines is the bad English. You probably saw that word in your art scroll. The word is actually look into matters. And the Hebrew is nachesh yenachesh, which is the language snake. Joseph is saying, yeah, I am a snake guy. And it's right there. He's saying, I have wisdom. And again, just because you have the wisdom doesn't make it right. It becomes a manipulation, a taking advantage of, even when done in righteousness. Have you ever heard, the idea of somebody getting mad for saying and saying to you, who told you that you could do that? Now, they brought down a story of, I forget which Hasidic Rebbe, or which Rav it was. It was a Rav, I think Litvish Rav. Forget who. Pardon the story, but it's to roughly paraphrase. The kid, the Rebbe, was acting up, really bad kid, and one of the guests took the kid home and stayed with him in the house, and he missed the wedding to watch the kid, and everybody had a great experience. The wedding went really well. No, the kid didn't do a big embarrassment, and nobody knew any different. So the Rebbe knew, and he said, where's the kid after it was all done, and where's my friend, whoever the other guy was. And he went home afterwards, and he saw the friend and the kid. He said, what's going on here? He said, man, I saved the wedding. He was going to throw punch on the, red punch on the wedding dress, and it would have been a disaster for you. So I saved the day, and thank God, you had a great wedding. How do you feel? He said, who told you to do that? That is not your mitzvah. I thought I was doing you a favor. That's what the one side, but the Rebbe is saying, who told you to do that? That's not your job. That's my job to worry about that, not yours. So you see, even a righteous deed, and look, it would have been a disaster. The fact is, wisdom does not always add up to being absolutely the truth and righteous. I think any male-female relationship can see that. I remember when my kids were even littler than they are now, I thought, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to buy a little miniature plastic table and chairs, and the kids can eat at the plastic table and chairs, and that way they don't get messed up the table for the adults that are eating. Sounds logical, doesn't it? Little kids and babies and messing up the little table. I didn't buy it in the end. You know why? I realized wisdom says I'm right. Wisdom says you're right. But life and understanding, Bina, and it comes from God. It's a bit prophetic when to realize these things. And this is not to my whatever. This is how women operate. A shtickle on the prophetic, that from faith in God, God gives you the answer. That's just what women do, which men also don't get. As I realized, those kids aren't going to sit at that table. They might, I might order them to. Within 5 seconds, they're going to get up and sit with the adults. And what are you going to do? You're going to put your foot down? Oh, I said sit at your table. It's ridiculous. So you see, wisdom was right. I was right. You should sit at your little kid table. I sit at my big table, and we're all happy. Only it doesn't work. You are being cunning. You're being sly. You sit at your little table, and it can become demeaning and disrespectful, even if you take it that far. So that's what the thing with Shem and eating the tree of life is all about. As great as Shem was, and this is again in a metaphysical Garden of Eden reality, wherever Shem was in the point in time and space. But if you have the idea, hey, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm thinking I'm going to go eat the tree of life. Why? Why? Well, don't you know how cool it is to eat a tree of life and live forever and know God and talk to God and be this amazing man of God? Well, yeah, but frankly, that sounds like ego. Who told you that you should know God, talk to God, and that God needs to hear from you all day? Just because you can doesn't make it right. And Shem paid the price. He paid the price. It says he fulfilled the verse. He ate and lives forever. And Gera, this is for you. This is the secret of Chira, the friend of Yehuda. At that point, the 13 or 1200 years of Shem incognito begin. As the friend of Judah, it is going to span all the way to Ezekiel. And it's not a pleasant ride for Shem. Man who's finite, seeking immortality, and all of a sudden becomes blessed or so-called blessed with immortality is a curse. Shem paid the price. And all that comes with it came with it. Now Shem was restored. And Shem will be part of the redemption process through the 4 craftsmen. But don't think that people still to this day call him an Ovid Avodah Zarah. He's a nobody, they say. He is paying the price. Because when you're that high, you can be believed. Whatever Shem says goes. Are you going to argue with Shem? Only Shem's not God. And there's no greater evil than if your reality differs with God's reality. And you're telling people about reality. Now we all bite of that tree of knowledge of good and evil. Until the snake is gone, we all suffer the consequence, and we attempt to paint reality for each other and teach, but Shem's reality was pretty close. And that's the distortion that can be lethal. That's the hair's breadth between knowledge of good and evil. From this point when Shem, before he goes incognito, he gives the high priesthood over to Abraham. Only Abraham wasn't fit for the high priesthood because he was married to Hagar. And thereby, to understand that, everyone will get it wrong. What Shem really was giving over to Abraham. They say that Shem lost the priesthood. No, he gave it. And the repair of that is Mashiach ben Yosef's death. Right? We always now have 2 sides of the story. Did Shem give the priesthood or did he lose the priesthood? Doubt. Gematria Amalek. There's always this wisdom, understanding, back and forth. Did you mean this? Did you mean that? The Talmud Bavli is based on that. Always oscillating. Did you mean this? Did you mean that? Man and woman. Did you mean this? Did you mean that? So the Mashiach ben Yosef program over the generations that comes from a level of absolute truth called Melech Mashiach attempts to get it right, the King Messiah program, which never actually attains that level. It comes from that domain. Always must die because that program makes the wrong conclusion every time. The conclusion from wisdom over the prophetic, the ego over the godly, the snake over the will of God. And it just keeps reiterating itself over and over and over again. Now, Shem founded that program because Shem, that was his job. He was the one that delivered everything over at that moment with Melchizedek, Abraham moment on the Temple Mount. And for all of Shem's greatness, he did pay a price. But who doesn't? Yosef didn't pay the price for going into Egypt. And then when he circumcised the Egyptians, says the Midrash, that brought the heir of Rav out. Everybody makes mistakes, and the bigger you are, the more massive mistakes you make. Right? Moses hitting the rock, that was something small. Aaron and the golden calf. Now, these men are not accountable completely, but God holds them to a standard. Wisdom shall not remain over prophetic. It's the cunning. The idea of the Midrash is that Shem, see, the Midrash plays into it even. That's the thing. It says that Shem was a god above and Jacob was a god below. Now, what does that mean, a god above and a god below? We know that God's hand through divine providence is called Mazal. Right? God interacts with mankind. And man can interact with God. But it must come from the prophetic. Let God come through you. You don't take control of God. Once you start doing it with wisdom, there's a problem. Big problem. That ego gets a taste of God and says, wow, this is great. Now what God meant through the Midrash is mankind can influence this world. Right? We are the consciousness of God creating the world, that God works with the agency of man in creation to bring the repair so that we have merit to live in the world to come. In a sense, God gives you a portion of creation so that you have merit to live forever in the world to come. And it comes with reward and punishment, and good and bad. When you take it from wisdom, it is a horrendous evil. When it comes from the prophetic, it's the most profound good. Now, why is it evil? It's obvious. If you have the power to basically interact with God in this world, that the word God isn't, we're not talking capital G-O-D here. We're saying to become godly, right? It's like Abraham was able to pray and nullify decrees, right? God gave Abraham that power. When the righteous pray, they say that God brings about the prayer. So we have ability as men. We have the power of God invested below in this world. God seeks to dwell in this world. Now that does not make man God. But the ego doesn't know that. The ego rides on that, and that's where it gets dangerous. And it's you can't tell the difference. When a righteous man is giving a profound Torah, you say, wow, that's great. But the fact is, to God's perspective, it might be a horrendous evil. And then, so what happens? You pay the price. God says, okay, you did good. You have merit. You get the world to come. You brought people to tshuva and to God. But now you have to taste your reality. And if your reality is not God's reality, you die and you fall victim of the snake and eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So what is the real point? Where does it go wrong? I'll tell you where it goes wrong. When you think that this God level is a level to aspire to. You cannot wake up one day and say, you know what? I want to be godly today. That is not your business that God's presence should be laid upon you. If God decides to bless you with God revelation, the Shekhinah, Mazal, blessing, that belongs to God alone. It's a prophetic gift, and your job is to not have ego and to control it. Everybody's fallen victim to that. The problem is when it develops like it has into these days, when people believe that God is a level to aspire to. And there are groups out there that believe that. It's become almost where it's not even a taboo to say that. King Chizkiyahu was the closest to Mashiach that ever lived. He was the last guy that woke up one day and said, you know what I want to do today? I think I'm going to aspire to be Mashiach. I think I'm pretty good. I'm a charismatic guy. Let's do it. And you know what? He almost succeeded. And anyone that knows the Bible, anti-missionary, that they use the Isaiah quotes of the suffering servant and stuff to apply to Chizkiyahu HaMelech, Chizkiyahu the king. And he almost pulled it off. But the Talmud says, you know what? Not quite. Yeah, you were close, but you didn't do it. And therefore, there is no Messiah for Israel. When God brings redemption and God puts his grace upon somebody, that is to God and God alone. You don't aspire to do that. It's not for mankind to say, I think I'm going to try to save the world. You do your part, you become righteous, you become a vessel for the divine, not being the divine. That's where all the idolatrous religions come from in the world, was from that thinking. Me, I, me, I'm going to do it. I'm going to rise up and eat of the tree of life and live forever. It sounds, zealous. Look at me. I achieved. I broke into God's kingdom. It's a chutzpah. It's arrogant. It's egotistical. It's from wisdom. And eventually it gets everybody killed. The repair is when Joseph finally lives. When we realize, let go, let God work, let the revelation of God come, let God inspire you, let God put the words in your mouth, let the Spirit of God thrive. And it's a much more peaceful and pleasant lifestyle. And being the man of wisdom and me is very volatile and warlike and combative and hard-headed and not soft of mind and understanding. And that's what this whole thing was about, wisdom versus prophecy. Shlomo got to the point where his wisdom was very much him. And he paid the price with the wives, the horses. And the idea of forgetting all your Torah, I'll get it back. It's very masculine. But the Mashiach program is not masculine, it's feminine. Malchus, the kingdom of God, the vessel of receiving. That's where the program comes from. God rests it upon you. And then God says, now go on, be you. It's okay, go on and be you. I'm with you. You see, there's a very fine line with you being you and going on being you than saying, God, let me tell you who I am and let me tell you who you are. Big difference between the masculine and the feminine. And so that masculine takeover comes from a cunning edge. It doesn't look cunning. It seems very righteous and zealous. Look what I'm going to achieve. But don't be fooled. It's actually and again, evil is a harsh word. Because it doesn't appear evil in any way. The Torah that comes from all of it is actually very good. The problem is on that level between you and God. There's a perversion. And eventually people keep eating of that fruit. That's why Mashiach ben Yosef dies. Redemption never came. We keep falling victim of the snake and dying, and death is in the world until Mashiach and redemption come. The good news is it will be repaired. The prophecies do speak of the repair. And it will come. The understanding will come. The feminine will come. Mashiach will come. The prophecy will come. But we see now the drastic difference between the two schools. Ideally, one leads to limitation and forgetfulness. One leads to revelation, memory, and recollection, and God's presence dwelling in this world. I.e., the third temple standing, coming from heaven, or let me run up and build it and show you how I'm going to build a Tower of Babylon to God. They both look identical, ironically. And this is very Hanukkah. Very, very Hanukkah. Right? This is Greek 101. The Greek wisdom is, let me tell you how smart I am and rational and all these things. Whereas the Jewish method was always prophetic, the prophet. And look in the Tanakh, the Jews have always gone against the prophets. So this is again, I say in the article, one of the 70 faces of Torah, at least. This dichotomy. Me versus letting there be God, ego versus selfless. Joseph and the brothers, Judaism versus Greece. Welcome to the article Parashas Miketz given on Hanukkah. As I always say, for some reason, the Parsha of the week just happens to work every time. It's not planned, it just happened. The most basic way we can understand this is the need to be the wise man, the scholar, and I'll never forget my Torah again. That's the student. Right? The student takes notes. He wants to pass his test, give me a good grade, throw me a cookie, and it doesn't work. Right? Any student of Bruce Lee is not Bruce Lee. The teacher and the student are different worlds. The teacher knows the answer. The student is trying to always find the answer. The teacher knows the answer. The bottom line is, we all know the answer. Sometimes somebody did give you some charity, and the answer was written down. But in these kind of topics, the answer is not written down. The students have always kind of lobbied on a certain slant. Eventually, a teacher comes along from this this domain of King Messiah program. It's not the Messiah. It's the place of where man and Mazel work, where the ego is mitigated or not involved in terms of the revelation coming down. Right? There's a revelation of Torah that comes from a sublime place. The Zohar is one of them. Rabbis that are over time that have worked with the Zohar. So it's not that when you eat the tree of knowledge, you're intrinsically evil. Right? There are many revelations of works of Torah that are sublime. But eventually people succumb to the ego and to the snake, the Yetzer Hara. The Talmud says, what about those that didn't die or those that didn't sin? Eventually the answer is always the same. And they say it about Shem as well. The snake has not been removed from the world yet. Yet the place of that Torah from a place of non-duality is a realm called Melech Mashiach, the King Messiah. The place where Yosef lives. The place where the Torah just keeps going. Right? It's when you stop and get paranoid and you give a premature answer, that's where the ego comes in. You know, my wisdom has done its job. Whereas the prophetic just keeps going. And we see Joseph push the limits of this prophecy. If you're going to push the limits of prophecy, God knows no limit. You might find yourself being taken to Egypt as a slave. And you know what? If you care about God and His Torah, it's worth it. That's the difference. Wisdom's not prepared to go there. Wisdom says, okay, God, I care to here. I have a bit of a limit of how much I care. Prophecy says, I'll give my life. Not a problem. Now, the irony is when you give limit is when you die. Right? Fear and the Yetzer Hara remove the soul from the body. That's the snake. That's the angel of death, says the Zohar. When you go with the prophetic, when you go with the inspiration of God, you say, I'll give my life. That's when we say, oh, Yosef Chai. Yosef still lives. That's the irony. Anyone that knows martial arts knows this story. How do you break like 20 cinder blocks with your hand? You know for a fact you're going to break that cinder block. If you doubt, then you're not. You're probably going to break your hand. Mind over matter. If it is true, God will make you survive. You have to live it, go through the storm, and that storm is actually the vessels that bring the truth to you. Only the maverick, the teacher, can do that. The student will always lag behind, playing catch up. Eventually, you get out of proportion, you're left behind, and you will die. Everyone does. The benchmark, those moments of life in the microcosm, those moments what we live is when we work through it. And working through an argument, not for the sake of being right, but for the sake of bringing glory to God's name. Seeing the other point of view. Imagine an entire life of that. That's what Messiah would be. An entire life of letting God work things out. Now, again, there's only one Messiah program, and that guy cannot do it himself. That comes from God. That person then becomes the real Mashiach ben Yosef, the one that doesn't die. Because God makes him keep living. And that means God is on him, not he went to God and said, God, well, let's do this. The man doesn't have a choice. Eov suffers, but that's not your business, as the analogy. Eov's suffering is for you to understand God's hand, not to understand what Eov is going through. Eov is Job. Forget Job. It's about the hand of God that is to be revealed to all. Again, God is not a madrega or a level that we try to aspire to. And when you get into the most loftiest ranks, it becomes a thought, maybe I can be the master of Mazal. And nobody wants to say, I want to be God. No one says that. But the ego does. It paints a picture. You don't have to say it. The ego's saying, and then you battle yourself. You're lying. You're going, no, I don't think I'm God. And they say, what do you think? You're God? You say, no, I'm a humble guy. But the bottom line is, your Mazal that you're kicking up, the storm, it tells everybody you want to be God. It's not that you're an idolater, so to speak. That's the nature of the evil inclination, the ego, and we battle it, we bury it, it becomes the shadow in all of us. The idea is to not battle that. How do you end that battle? How do you come to peace in your inner self and let yourself shine? Be what God wants you to be? Stop being God. That means stop thinking that you have the right to be God. And we find a lot of ways to do it. My rules, my way, we all find that's what the Yetzer Hara evil inclination does. Is it finds a way to rule and reign supreme. The idea is let God put it upon you. Then there is no such thing as a level to attain to. A level of, wow, if I knew Mazal, think of all the things I could do. Even if it's righteous, I could bring tzedakah to the whole world. I'm going to go out and make $1 billion from Mazal and bring charity to all. And that's you being the Messiah again. That's not your job. Your job is to be a vessel. Now, if God comes to you and says, look, I got this thing. I got $1 billion. I got to give it to you. I need you to go dish it out. You say, okay, Hineni, here I am, God. Here, do your will. Your job is to strive to be the greatest vessel you can be. Not to say, you owe me, God, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this for you. It sounds zealous. It isn't. Joseph now walks a fine line. Do you see how he works with the brothers? Putting them all in age and lined up according to their age. Now, Joseph is using wisdom. And I'm not coming to judge Joseph. The point is, the brothers are witnessing the craziest mazel of all time. Imagine you're looking at the viceroy of Egypt. And this guy, this non-Jew, again, it's for the sake of argument, right? The Jewish family, they call it the Ger-Toshav family, whatever you want to use there. Because the Egyptians certainly were not Ger-Toshav. And this guy knows us intimately, but by an accident? And they believe the accident. And what allows them to believe the accident is, again, they bought their own garbage. Let me tell you about reality. They're telling you Joseph died, we killed him, oh, boo-hoo-hoo. When here, the Torah student looking at the story, we see Joseph the whole time. They gave up on God. They told God how to interpret reality, and now they're getting spooked by this Mazal. Joseph never let go. He never let go. Not in the pit, not with the Ishmaelites, not in Potiphar, not in jail, not with the cupbearer, not with Pharaoh. Because that dream was prophetic. God said, Joseph, you are the Joseph program. There's nothing for you to latch onto and use your wisdom and, God, I'm going to be the Joseph program. No, there's no such thing. God put it in his ear. You have no choice. You are chosen to be the Joseph program. I'm not letting you let go of this if you try. That's called the Job program. You're going through the Joseph program whether you like it or not. Now, you can comply or it'll be a very rough ride. Now, God chose Joseph because he was a vessel able to handle this experience. In fact, he comes out of it being called righteous. The brothers had the opposite. They took on, they were the former prophets that became the wise men. Joseph was the wise man that finally became the prophet. They gave up and they started interpreting reality. They started believing, hey, we can control Mazel. So what happens? They get shown up by Joseph's Mazel. How's that for a day in the park? Now, in Joseph's dream, we say in dreams there's always a point of stupidity. Right? Your dream and your all these things are amazing things going on, and then you're changing your spare tire in your car with your next door neighbor. Why does he have to come into this? So the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, the ego, and the level of the animal soul that's in all of us, that's where the dream takes place in the body. Even though the upper worlds come in. So it looks like what's called a davar shtus, a stupid element of folly. The fact is, that's if you use wisdom. But if you understand divine imagery and Mazal, you'll understand that your neighbor's name is Bob. Bob. I always say the name Bob. But you're okay, so I'll make a different one. Tony. Your neighbor's name is Tony. Right? And spare tire, I'm making this up, but spare tire in Hebrew, let's just say means the levirate marriage, okay? So spare tire in Hebrew is levirate marriage, and Tony means marriage. Express the point. So you say, so the prophetic is, this and that. Now you'll find in your life that the levirate marriage is for wherever you're holding in understanding. Meaning, the davar shtus, the stupid agency, if you don't use your wisdom, because what wisdom is the Yetzer Hara by itself. And you're going to be very quick to say, that's stupid. That's ridiculous. That was the dumb part. Why do you need that? And that's the impurity. But if you go with purity, and you say, wait a minute, let's interpret this for the good. And you allow the Hashem to interpret, as Joseph said, Hashem determines the dream, not me. Then you work out even the matters of stupidity, and they become a prophetic insight. We never knew last week that the dream contained an element of spying. Whereas this week, Joseph, we're told in the Torah that the dream came true. Joseph recognized his brothers, and then he saw the dream happening, and he says, you guys are spying out the land. Now, in Joseph's real time, that was a davar shtus. What do you mean you're spying out a land? What kind of ridiculousness is that? But now that's happening in our real time, we say, wow. Joseph realized this is it. This is the part. Now, where Joseph went wrong was he doesn't tell the brothers that back then because he was being a wise man. That was the part he guarded close to his chest from wisdom. He didn't let the prophecy come through. Had he done that, had it been interpreted properly, maybe context would have changed. But he didn't. And now it becomes the mantle over and above his brothers. And that opened up a whole new can of worms. Fast forward into the days of Moses in the desert, the spies, Lashon Hara, evil speech. Joshua doesn't, but Manasseh does. Because Joseph had a thing with Lashon Hara. So you see the connections now are going to lead to the future, which is also an element of the Parsha. Every dream has matters of stupidity. That's the principle. So we saw the brothers had one, and Pharaoh had another. Pharaoh says, everybody, yeah, I was standing on the river. That's the way to go me. Wisdom, arrogance, pride, and evil intention again. And what Joseph's saying is the prophecy comes from God. Now, where Joseph gets him is, in Kabbalistic literature, Joseph is the river. Right? In divine terminology or analogy, or imagery, Yesod, foundation, Joseph is like a river. So what do you mean you're standing on the river? Joseph knows the son of Jacob is not going to be stood on by some Egyptian king. Give me a break. So you're lying to me. I know for a fact you didn't stand on the river. Oh, well, I meant I was on the banks of the river. Oh, that makes sense. Now I can interpret the dream. Thank you very much. Because until you were standing on the river, it didn't make sense. And Joseph then goes and tells the dream. Now, interestingly enough, in Psalms, I forget which number it is, and don't drill me on this, but I think 81, 91. Joe, do you know which one this is? They can Ados, Yosef, Samo, the testimony in Joseph. They placed him. I think it's 81. The point is, King David in Psalms brings down that Joseph actually inherited their hay in his name for sanctifying the name of God in private. They say it's with Potiphar and the sanctity, but also here because they quote what happened in my episode with Pharaoh, that Joseph understood the prophecy because God gave over the prophecy to Joseph. Thus, Joseph's name is actually Yehoseph, with God's letter Hey in the Joseph program. So Joseph becomes infused with the divine agency even more. And he interprets the dream through the Devar Shtus, through the point of insanity, and the dream becomes rectified. Now, what comes of that? Oh, only that Joseph rises to be the king of Egypt. No worries. But again, if what Pharaoh's trying to do is say, I'm going to be sneaky on you, I'm going to use my wisdom, the same story that Joseph fell victim to everybody else before them, right? What holds back the revelation is when we hold back. Right? The Ish Yehudi, the man of Judah program is predicated on not holding back. And the only reason why you hold back is wisdom says to. It's foolish if I don't hold back. And that's the folly in itself. That is the ego in itself. That is the battle within of itself. That is, let me be on a level of God myself. I'll tell you what God wants you to know, not what God wants you to know. You see how it pyramids. What you think of self-righteousness is you're battling God. You're saying, God, no, I don't want them to know what you want them to know. Hold back, God. Don't tell them. I disagree. Well, who are you? Just shut up and do your job and let the program come out. So by the time Joseph was with Pharaoh, he realizes that. And Pharaoh tells the story. The whole story came out. And Joseph sees the light. He understands the imposing exile. The whole 9 yards. The prophecy flowed like a faucet. Joseph allowed the prophecy to mandate. Now that we get into the kishkas of the story of wisdom and prophecy, look at the tremendous fractal here. The idea is that the same story is reiterated. Even from the Parsha, the time of year of Hanukkah, just all the things coming in. But the initial episode itself must be here. Right? Every fractal contains the actual fractal. That's simple logic. And remember what the fractal was? The episode of eating a limb of a live animal. Now, to quickly reiterate, Joseph was holding of post-Sinai, the brothers pre-Sinai, difference between being post-Sinai, pre-Sinai observance of Torah. Are we Jews? Are we Gerim? Are we going in the end of days when there's no prophecy? Should we bring back prophecy? Is there prophecy now? Should we use wisdom? All these variables. Again, remember what we said, wisdom will always say this side or that. So the brothers were teetering on that wisdom fallacy just by the definition of the question. There should be an absolute answer of prophecy and no question. The very fact they teetered says they weren't solid. And neither was Joseph. And the idea is somehow they conceived of a way to eat of the limb of a live animal that was not a problem. Whether you say it was the powers of creation they used, again, kind of being a little bit like God in the egotistical way. I feel I have the powers to create a cow like God. Egotistical and wisdom. That is not prophecy. God never said, guys, I command you to make a cow and eat the limb. And if you did, that would be a Mechadish Dat, making your own religion. You see, they were living the same issues we're living today, in different vessels. Joseph says, whatever it is you're doing, it's wrong. Wisdom says it's wrong. No, Joseph, if prophetically you knew it was wrong, then you would have solved the whole equation. But by wisdom, they were actually correct. They were not eating the limb of a live animal. But by prophetically, they were wrong. They tried Joseph. They find him guilty. And we know how the story goes. That is the story of the limb of the live animal. Now, why do we bring it into the light of this week's Parsha? And we've had all this background of the scenery and the wisdom and the prophecy and the Joseph this and the brothers that and the dream, but the skeleton, the river going through the story, the Joseph going through the story, is Reuben. Reuben says, I quoted it, where's my quote? And he says like this, and his, i.e. Joseph, as he is talking in the presence of Joseph, how ironic is that? Joseph is there, and Reuben shouts, and his blood as well, behold, is being avenged. Now, how amazing is that? In the Parsha of Noah, Adam was given, don't eat meat. Noah's given, eat meat, don't eat the limb of a live animal. Should you eat the limb of a live animal where the soul is its blood? The Torah is telling you, you know what you're going to do? You're going to become an animal yourself. That's what happens. When you eat meat the wrong way, you become an animal. And by doing so, you're going to kill. And that person's blood will become avenged. That leads way to the necessity of courts of Noahides in the world. It's a fantastic revelation. He's telling you, if you do this, you will do that. Right? You eat poorly, you will become an animal, arouse your animal soul, which we all have. This goes for Jews and non-Jews together. You will kill, either physically or spiritually, and the court of law will need to be established. Now, with that said, we know that with the whole eating the limb represented again. We said pre-Sinai, post-Sinai, all those things with Joseph. And now that we know the logic behind Reuben, look what Reuben is saying. He's saying, Joseph's blood is being avenged. That means we think Joseph is dead. We must have killed Joseph. Why did we kill Joseph? Because we must have been eating the limb of a live animal. If we were eating the limb of a live animal, that means Joseph was right. If Joseph was right, we were wrong. If we were wrong, Jacob is wrong. There's no Israel. There's no 12 tribes. Sinai is wrong as we knew it. Wisdom and prophecy is wrong as we knew it. Jews and Gerim are wrong as we knew it. Joseph is wrong as we knew him. The entire universe goes back to chaos and void. Because that fundamental fractal is what we live today. And by them going against through doubt, the powers of Amalek, the same gematria is doubt, they have torn apart the universe. Only there's one problem. Boker Tov, ladies and gentlemen, Joseph is standing right in front of you. And they never knew. Jacob even gets the prophecy, so he says, I hear there are provisions in Egypt. The gematria, the word Jacob saw, is Ani Yosef. I am Joseph. So Jacob starts coming to life. The prophecy is coming back. That's on the side of merit to him, but the brothers are willing to tear down the world. So when Judah says, we're going to tear down Egypt, well, you don't have to. You just brought down the world. And by that thinking, that's where Joseph is forced to say, I am Joseph. Because Joseph carried out the prophecy all the way through. He never let go by not being a wise man. This was not Joseph's wisdom. This is Joseph living the Joseph prophecy program. He never gave up. He never let go. Those little life lessons of, don't give up, never let go, always see things through. All those little cliches and proverbs we hear, that's the Torah of Shem. That's the good side of wisdom. Wisdom is not bad. It might be the seed of all death. But that's where on the sixth day of creation it says, and death will be swallowed up as life will become very good. That is the Yetzer Hara, says the commentary. That by death we then gain insight. From bad we gain knowledge of good. Seeing things through, being dedicated, hearing the voice of God, being disciplined to be a vessel for God. By understanding the problem. And in Kabbalah it's called Bon. the defect, illuminates the rectification. So yeah, wisdom is a problem, and being egotistical, and people thinking they're God, and I can control reality, and I'll manipulate this. It is evil. But if you maintain it in a holy environment where everybody King Solomon says there's no man so holy that doesn't sin. So their wisdom will yield a life experience. Shem's Torah embedded in Moses' Torah is the sum of all those wisdoms. You don't have to create your own religion and a set of wisdom doctrine. Shem figured it out. He knows life. He paid the price. He ate the tree of life, but he knows life. And the Torah of Moses is prophetically given those episodes of life. And you might say it's the brothers sitting down, eating a piece of kosher or unkosher meat, and by the grace of God, somebody decided one day to put that as the example of what the brothers did. And by finding Reuven in this week's Parsha, we put together a prophetic A to B. We say, man, that was quite a story. We might not had to have said it. There are other answers, possibly. No one's forcing you to say this. But why not? Maybe it just works. Maybe it's called That's How Life Works. And there are 70 faces of the Torah. Well, this is a really good one of them. Because it ties in the whole Torah to this point. The level of Joseph called Yesod, foundation that contains everything. Are there other answers? Always. Is it a prophetic answer? Yes. Whoever put that in the head of the person that said they sat down to eat the limb of a live animal. And then we find Reuven's answer here buried, mysteriously. His blood is being avenged. That is the prophetic inspiration of God to connect dots in the Torah to make a cohesive story. Now, this is a side point. What is this stuff about meat? Just want to throw this in. I saw in Rabbi Hirsch today. Rabbi Hirsch is something amazing. We know that the Rambam, this is a side diversion. The Rambam says that we understand truth by using our five senses. Again, ego, wisdom, rationality, whatever I know to be true is true. No! So Rav Hirsch says the 7 laws of Noah are counterproductive to the senses. Right? My taste buds want to eat blood because my animal soul wants to return to being an animal and relinquish the divine traits in man. The 7 laws of Noah says, no, you should not eat the limb of a live animal. Which then can branch off into many applicable ways of the governing of meat. Okay? I want to see God. Show me God. I demand to see God right now. I see myself, so I must be God. No, God is what you can't see. So again, the eyeballs were fooling you. The 7 laws of Noah make you transcend into a spiritual realm where your senses have no governance. Adam was not given meat. Noah was given meat. And we find that the nature of the Torah ultimately is that man should have meat in abundance. Eat at your pleasure. Why? Because this is the currency of tzedakah given to the third temple, that when man is there's no man in the world that doesn't sin, offerings are given to the temple as the tzedakah that makes the world run. You care about the temple, you bring the animal to Jerusalem, you offer it, and the Kohanim have a barbecue. The Torah says, eat to your soul's satisfaction. So how does it work? The idea is that kosher meat can be consumed, and by the constant refinement of the lack of blood, the lack of the limb, is what pacifies the animal inclination to the point where it actually becomes purified and godly. Right? So it's like it's like putting good oil in your car versus bad oil. If you keep your car well oiled, your car purrs like a kitten. And it's healthy for the car. If you don't, it's horrible. It'll kill it. And you say, what about the non-Jews? They don't eat kosher meat. The Ger Toshav is commanded, until he's Jewish, he eats non-kosher meat. The idea is that when he becomes a Ger, by taking on Sinai, he is refined. That's how he came to choose Sinai. So all the time he is not eating kosher meat, but what he's doing is he's holding on to the nevela, the carcass, as a form of connection to Sinai. He is becoming refined by the limb of the live animal by not eating of that. All of his commandments are being ultra refined, as the last thing he takes on before Judaism, should he wish to go there, is eating kosher meat. So again, it's achieving the same goal of refinement by different means. Okay, that's the subplot. We just have a little digression. Now we're back to Shem and Joseph, and the idea is that through the eating meat and the blood and the limb and the vengeance and all these things, what we see is just like the eating the limb of a live animal story prevailed. Right? It was a benign answer last week. It was irrelevant. It just kind of made the article work. But this week we stuck with it. We didn't let go. And there you see the continuity. The whole story erupts around this point. And from that then erupts another level. Shem's level of Torah of life. What do we learn about life? Seeing things through. The Vilna Gaon says in the method of redemption, when things get difficult, God forbid you stop doing what you're doing and you turn around and go do something else. Don't stop. Let the prophetic go through. If you're doing it now, it means God told you. And if you think your wisdom told you, your wisdom and your ego are lying to you, it came from God. Don't stop. God will fix it. You're inspired by God. Absolute determination gets it through. And in case you didn't realize, the brothers were wrong and Joseph just happened to still live. It's called Od Yosef Chai. So Mashiach and Yosef, every generation dies for the sake of politics, and again, not seeing it because they don't want to see it. When wisdom says, I don't want you to know. I have an agenda. I don't want you to know. How about the redemption of the Gerim? No, because then what will the Jews say? Well, how about what does God say? How about what does God want? Everybody has a plan of Mashiach, what they want and what's good for them. But to know what's good for you must come from the prophecy of God. And in fact, the redemption of the Gerim are what's good for Israel. Why? Because the two most powerful tools come back, Shabbos and Torah. And if you think that those can exist without the Ger, you're nuts. The Maharal of Prague says very clearly, Seichel is a ger in this world. The Torah's intellect is invested in the gerim in this world. You want the Torah? Interact with gerim. You want to know how to keep Shabbos? Then be a Jew, which the gerim show you how to do. That only comes by the prophetic inspiration versus agendas and wisdom. Just like the dreams, the folly must be turned around to a merit. You say this is the redemption of Goyim and idolaters and Akum. No. This is the redemption of those that believe in Sinai. The Ger Toshav, the Chasid Homos Olam. Now, when Joseph and the brothers are bowing down to Joseph, the initial letters of that sentence in the Torah, you won't believe what it spells. Akum. That's the message. Again, a fractal in a fractal. They're viewing it like Akum. That's like the personification of what this is about. Don't view it as Akum idolater. Akum means idolater. He who worships the stars. View it as a ger. Don't view it as the folly of the dream. See it for what it really is. And as we're saying the whole way through, Joseph received the dream. He received the inspiration from God. And the one thing Joseph did not do was let go. You see that the stories here are not letting go. Whether it be the prophecy versus wisdom, or the limb, or the brothers and Joseph. And all through this Hanukkah time, it's just not letting go. Even in real time, the idea of the Ger and Shabbat, you see, it's just not letting go. In fact, it's picking up steam in our world now. The whole essence of redemption is the idea of letting the prophecy flow. Where Mashiach and Yosef doesn't have to die for the sake of being cunning like the snake. It's where Yosef lives, and we finally get a glimpse of that redemption of Mashiach and David. If not the actual thing, at least the revelation of that Melech Mashiach level. At least if we can try our best to get the revelation down when matters that matter the most, then we get that flash of light where Yosef lives. And so too is the nature of the Parsha, which is called Miketz, which comes from the language Ketz Yamin, the end of days. So too in the end of days. Zohar says that if you say Ketz Yamim with a mem, that's the idea of forgetting, of the left. But in Daniel, in the close of Daniel, it says Ketz Yamin, the end of days with a nun, which is an aberration. The idea of revelation and recollection. The time period where redemption is seen, called the Zechira, where we can perceive the wisdom of God, where we can perceive the hand of God, where we understand Mazal, where God's universe is manifest around us, that we can interact with it, and not to take control of it, but let it come through you and let God use you in it. Other people will see the hand of God, but you need to know that's not your hand. That's God's hand. He allowed you to use it. Not to be fooled. Not to be fooled. And you might believe that it was your ability to move that hand. It wasn't. That was God's hand the whole time. When Jacob is called a God below and Shem a God below, above, eventually they learned the lesson. God moves the body and emanates the body of the righteous, and we are what's called a chariot to God's emanation. Right? Jacob was called Tiferet, the level of beauty. He was a Merkava, a chariot to that level. God uses Jacob as a scepter in God's hand to bring change in the world. It's like the Job program. Jacob is not the God or God at all. God says, let me do something in creation with the Jacob program. Jacob learns to not wrestle because he gets hurt wrestling the angel. He learned it's better not to wrestle, just let God be. Shem and Jacob learned that the most. And it's not for naught that Jacob served Shem for 50 years learning that lesson. That is the prophecy. That is the prophet. Letting God work the prophet. Mind you, the Shekhinah spoke from the mouth of Moses. Where Moses did something better than anyone was, he never took credit for those words. Yet it was his mouth that spoke the voice of God. So in this time period of the revelation, it's letting God recall the Torah to you rather than saying, I will take command. Being the true teacher, as Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses the teacher, Shem who taught the Torah to Abraham. Rather than the student, always trying to find the answer to justify the cause and let me show you how great I am and I'm right and you're wrong and I'll prevail. That's the student. And you have to be that student to a certain point. But eventually you have to let go and say, God inspired me with this. Maybe it was said before. Maybe it wasn't. And they'll say, why do you have to make that chiddush? You say, I don't have to. It just is the right thing. It's right. It's yamin. It's zechira. It's not something about recollection or forgetting. You don't have to say it from wisdom. God simply inspired it and I went with it. And maybe people need to hear it. And so, too, that is how the redemption comes. That is the negation of duality. That is the revelation of emes for God. On one foot, you can say this is the rectification of Shem. He who made it the highest fell the lowest, only to bring out the most, which is the Torah, that was the basis of Torah, that the Torah of Moses will come upon. Shem lived it all. That's the greatness of Shem. He lived, he ate of the tree of life. That means he also went to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. To which the Midrash says that was the program in the first Garden of Eden that brought Adam to inevitably sin. But in this parsha we see that for one moment, for whatever Joseph did right and wrong, what we do see is the message of Joseph, which is the true Torah of Shem after all those years in prison. If you want to summarize the entire parsha, the prophecy over the wisdom, all these things, don't look at it from the negative and remind me what I'm supposed to do and don't do this. What was Shem's message the whole way through? The answer is, and you can take this a million ways, Joseph still lives. If the brothers had known that, if Joseph had just clung to that, if Jacob would have just sat with that, if Shem would have understood that initially, all would have been much better off. The snake would have left a long time ago. And we all have from this parsha, one basic lesson. From the story that began of eating the limb of a live animal, and something benign as that became a big balagan. The simple revelation of the story was something that we knew the whole time as having the advantage of being the reader here and the student. Now we can become the teacher by realizing in very simple terms the essence of redemption according to the Vilna Gaon. I'll close with this. Joseph still lives. Thank you very much. See you after Hanukkah.